Hello, grade 9. I'm teacher Lanny Jane Mesana. In Arts 9, Quarter 1, we have 4 topics. First is the elements and principles of arts in Western and Classical. Next is characteristics of arts in Western and Classical period. Third is the art elements and principles of sculpture in Western and Classical period. And then last is architectural sculpture during Western and Classical period. But the only topics that we were going to discuss are elements and principles of arts in Western and Classical, characteristics of arts in Western and Classical period, and then last is the art elements and principles of sculpture in Western and Classical period. Now, let's proceed to our first topic, which is elements and principles of arts in Western and Classical.
Class, look at the picture. What do you see on the picture? What do you call the things that the chef is using to cook food? Did you know that cooking is similar to arts? Why? Because like chefs, artists also used ingredients to produce an artwork. Have you ever looked at an artwork and wondered how the artists decided to begin making it? All art, whether two-dimensional like a painting or three-dimensional like a sculpture, contains one or more of the elements and principles. In elements of art, these are basic elements that are used by the artist in creating art. They are what you use to create an aesthetically pleasing work. When we make art, we need to understand and apply these 7 elements of art. First is line. It is a mark made by a tool such as a brush, pen, or stick, a moving point.
These are the kinds of lines. Now, let's relate it to Western and Classical arts. This is the example of line in Western and Classical arts. The shaft of a dead man, cave of Lascaux. So this is how it looks like. It is a cave art. What kind of line do you see on a cave painting? There are diagonal, vertical, dotted, curved, concave, broken, and convex. Do you see other kind of lines?
Let's now proceed to the second elements of arts, which is shape. A flat, enclosed area that has 2 dimensions, length and width. Artists use both geometric and organic shapes.
These are the kinds of shapes. I know you know everything about shapes. Now let's see the example of Western and Classical art in terms of shape, the Pyramid of Giza.
Pyramid of Giza is one of the best and most known pyramid in the whole world. So what are the shape that you can see in the artwork? Number 3 element is color. It is one of the most dominant elements. It is created by light. There are 3 properties of color: hue, value, and intensity. This is the example of Western and Classical art in terms of color. Lady and the Unicorn of Tapestry in 1506 to 1513.
The 4th element is called value. It is degrees of lightness or darkness. The difference between values is called value contrast.
Let's see the example of value during Western and Classical art. Judgment of Paris in 330 to 370 BC. It is a vase during Greek time.
As you can see, the background is dark, while the designs are light.
Next element is what we called form. Objects that are three-dimensional having length, width and height. They can be viewed from many sides. Forms take up space and value. Let's focus on the best example of form during Western and classical art. Queen Nefertiti. It is painted in a limestone in 18th dynasty during 1357 to 1375 BC. And it really has its own form. The next element is texture. It describes the feel of an actual surface. The surface quality of an object can be real or implied. Now let's have an example of texture in Western and classical art. Venus of Willendorf in 25,000 BCE to 28,000 BCE. What do you think the texture of this sculpture? The last element is what we called space. When we say space, it used to create the illusion of depth. Space can be two-dimensional, negative and or positive. This is the example of space. Tomb of the Diver, Paestum in 480 BCE. Can you describe space in this artwork?
That's all for the elements of art. Now, let's proceed to the principles of art. In principles of art, these are the standards or rules to be observed by artists in creating works of art. They are how to create and organize artwork. When elements are utilized with the principles in mind, outstanding artwork is created. Let's start with the first principles of art, which is balance, a distribution of visual weight on either side of vertical axis. Symmetrical balance uses the same characteristics, while asymmetrical uses different but equal weighted features.
Let's see the example of Western and classical art in terms of balance. And this is none other than the stunning rose window from the north transept. It is a stained glass design that shows a lot of balance in each details. Can you see the balance? Now let's proceed to the other principles of arts, which is contrast. It is arrangement of opposite element, light versus dark, rough versus smooth, small versus large, etc., in a composition so as to create visual interest.
This is the example of principles of art in terms of contrast. The Egyptian painting, a small versus large figures. As you can see, there are small and large images. The third principles of art is emphasis. It uses to make certain parts of an artwork stand out. It creates the center of interest or focal point. It is the place in which an artist draws your eye to first. Let's see the best example of emphasis in Western and classical art, which is the court of the Empress Eudora. As you can see, Empress Eudora was given emphasis in this artwork. She is the one on the middle wearing brown robe. Next is the movement. How the eye moves through the composition, leading the attention of the viewer from one aspect of the work to another, can create the illusion of action.
This is the example of movement in Western and classical art. Myron the Discobolus in 450 BC. Now, do you agree that it shows movement? Definitely yes. It is an act of throwing discus by Myron.
The next is what we call pattern, the repetition of specific visual elements such as a unit of shape or form, a method used to organize surfaces in a consistent, regular manner.
griffin and Arimaspian, an ancient Greek painting, is the best example of pattern in Western and classical art. As you can see, the geometric design on the sides of painting represent the pattern.
Next, we have the rhythm. It is the regular repetition of or alternation in elements to create cohesiveness and interest.
This is the example of rhythm in the principles of art in Western and classical art. The Villa of Mystery. This is the famous for the series of exquisite frescoes in one room, which are usually thought to show initiation of a young woman into a Greco-Roman mystery cult.
The last principles of art is what we call unity. It is visually pleasing agreement among the elements in a design. It is the feeling that everything in the work of art works together and look like it fits.
Mosaic of Head of Alexander is the example of unity. As you can see, the details of the stone are united and create by a very good artwork.
Again, these are the elements of art. We have line, shape, color, value, form, texture, and space. Next is the principles of art. We have balance, contrast, emphasis, movement, pattern, rhythm, and unity. Now, let's proceed to your written work 1 in arts. In a one whole sheet of paper, answer the learning task 1, page 5. Please read the direction carefully. You have to figure out the elements and principles of art, and then you're going to arrange the jumbled letters to form the correct word. Next topic that we will be learning is all about the characteristics of arts in Western and Classical period. And we will all start with the prehistoric period. Characteristics. Prehistoric drawings of animals were usually correct, in proportion, and native to each region. It means that the artist uses the actual sizes of the animals on their paintings. Artist. These paintings may be more an artifact of the archaeological evidence than a true picture of humans' first created art. And for example, we have a Lascaux cave painting in 15,000 to 10,000 BC. It is a cave painting during a prehistorical period. After that, we have the Egyptian period. It is a highly stylized, symbolic, and shows profile view of an animal or a person. The main color used are red, black, blue, gold, and green. Do you know why they choose those colors? Because Egyptians believed that those colors can stand under the heat of the sun for a long time.
Artists. In this period, it is not stated who is or are the artists involved in Egyptian painting, but there are slave laborers, well-paid and highly respected workers that are responsible for implementing the pharaoh's visions. When it comes to the tomb, it was the painter's task to preserve the dead individual's spirit. Example of Egyptian art is the hieroglyphics. It is a system of writing using picture symbols used in ancient Egypt.
Next is the Greek period. Its development is naturalistic but idealized depictions of the human body in which largely nude male figures were generally the focus of innovation.
Artists. The most famous of all ancient Greek painters was Apelles of Kos, whom Pliny the Elder lauded as having surpassed all the other painters who either preceded or succeeded him. Example of this is the amphora, which is a red figure base.
Next is the Roman period. It is the famous and distinctive style of Greek vase painting with figures depicted with strong outlines, with thin outlines reach its peak from about 600 to 350 BC, and divides into the two main styles, almost reversals for each other, of black figure and red figure, the other color forming the background in each case. For example is the Kirch style, which is also as Kirch vases that are red figure pottery. As you notice, the painting is black while the background is red. Example of the Roman period is the panel painting. Paintings flat panels of wood. It can be either small, single piece, or several panels joined together depicted figural scenes, including portraits and still life. Example of these is the pizza panel.
Another art in Roman period is the tomb or wall painting. It is a sharp, flatly outlined style of painting, depicts symposium scene on the wall. Example of it is the tomb of the diver in 470 BC. In tomb paintings, artists rely on the shade and hues of paint to create depth and lifelike feeling. Most of the common methods of painting is fresco. It is a water-based pigments on a freshly plaster on walls, and the encaustic that developed by Greek shipbuilders, used hot wax.
In Roman period, the classical or classicizing, when used in reference to Roman art, refers mostly to the influences of the Greek art from the classical and Hellenistic. Classicizing elements include the smooth lines, elegant drapery, idealized nude bodies, highly naturalistic forms, and balanced proportions that the Greeks had perfected over centuries of practice. The Battle of Alexander and Darius at Issus is one of the examples of Roman art. It details of the Roman mosaic done in the opus vermiculatum technique from the Casa del Fauno, Pompeii, late in the 2nd century BC. Now, let's proceed to the Byzantine period. It characterized a convincing image of reality, presented figures with direct gaze that were meant to spiritually engage the viewer. Mosaic is the technique that they use for decorative art or interior decorations. One of these examples is the Justinian I. It detailed of a 6th century mosaic at the Church of San Vitale, Ravenna, Italy. Next, we have the Romanesque period. They were inside of the churches, and they were like a book for the people who were not able to read. They were not realistic, they were rigid and schematic, and they did not have background landscapes. They were painted in bright colors to attract the attention of the people. Due to damaged mural over time, those remaining murals were transferred into canvas. Some of the artists were Francis Bacavia and Pablo Picasso, who kept a poster of it in his studio. One of the examples of Romanesque art is the Jesus Christ Pantocrator from the Isis mosaic in Hagia Sophia in 1261. The last period is the Gothic period. It elaborated for decorative effect. Its emphasis on elegance, delicate details, soft facial expressions, and smooth forms illustrating stories of the Bible and conveying moral learning. They use stained glass. It is a colored glass used to form decorative or pictorial designs. The North Rose window of Chartres Cathedral in France in 1190 to 1220 CE is the example of Gothic art. Again, what are the characteristics of arts in Western and Classical period? They are prehistoric period, Egyptian period, Greek period, Roman period, Byzantine period, Romanesque period, and Gothic period. Now, let's proceed to your performance task. Do the learning task 4 on page 13, coloring stained glass window design. Please read the direction carefully. For our last topic, it is the art elements and principles of sculpture in Western and Classical period. Let's proceed to the ancient era featuring the prehistoric period and Egyptian period. In prehistoric period, we have the featured artwork, which is the Venus of Willendorf, a Venus figurine dating to 28,000 to 25,000 BCE. For the mood, it intimate, sentimental, meaningful, totem-like passed through generations. For the idea or message, there are few ideas about what this figurine was. The first is that she symbolized a goddess of fertility with her enlarged genitals, and the red orc symbolized the life-giving menstrual blood. The second idea is that she served as a good luck charm. Let us now proceed to the Egyptian period. In this period, we have a featured art which is the Queen Nefertiti. She was a queen of the 18th dynasty of ancient Egypt. For the mood, the Nefertiti of the infamous sculpture dons her signature cap crown, an extravagant royal blue headdress with a golden diadem band and elaborated designs, which suggests a power embellished by an elegant aesthetic. Message: Queen Nefertiti is shown as a grown woman with a harmonic and balanced beauty, which is not disturbed by the slight folds under the eyes and chin, as well as the slightly sunk cheeks. Next is the Classical era featuring the Greek period and Roman period. For the Greek period, we have the featured artwork, which is the Discobolus. It is the discus thrower, an ancient Greek statue made by Myron on the Classical period during 5th century BC. For the mood, the Discobolus is involved in a demanding situation. His face and body are unusually relaxed and composed. His head is turned towards his escorting equipment. For the idea or message, it shows an athlete naked, refined, and eternally youthful, seemingly captured in the moment before releasing the discus. In fact, limbs and torso are artificially arranged to correspond with Greek ideas of balance and rhythm in a composition which is pleasing from one viewpoint only. For the Roman period, we have the Portinaccio sarcophagus in 180 to 190 BCE. For the mood, most of Roman sculptures are made of monumental terracotta. They did not attempt to compete with the freestanding Greek works of history of mythology, but rather they produced reliefs in the great Roman triumphal columns. For the idea or message, the composition focuses on the progress of the Roman horsemen, depicted in the guise of universal victor, in the melee soldiers, spears, and horses. It is used for the burial of Roman general involved in the campaign of Marcus Aurelius, a carved marble that depicts in the battle between Romans and Germans. Now, let's proceed to the medieval era featuring the Byzantine period, Romanesque period, and the Gothic period. For the first period, which is the Byzantine, we have here the Barberini diptych, which represents the emperor as triumphant victor. For the mood, the ivory shown here depicts a triumphant emperor, given to Cardinal Barberini by Nicolas Claude Fabre de Peiresc. in the early 17th century. The Barberini ivory must already have been in province by the 7th century. On the back is a list of barbarian kings and officials of the region. For the idea or message, the message of the work was also innovative as it combined the military victory of the emperor with the victory of Christianity, employing two angels carrying an image of Christ rather than the Roman era's use of a pair of winged victories. Next is the Romanesque period. For the featured art of this period, we have the Last Judgment in 1120 to 35 by Gislebertus. For the mood, is semicircular space above the main entrance of the church. As a result, everyone would see it whenever they came to church services. The message it sends is clear and tellingly harsh. We see Jesus at the center portrayed as powerful, ideal, and balanced. On the left, we see the angels helping to push lucky souls up into heaven looking elongated and otherworldly. For the last period is the Gothic period. For the featured art of this period is the Death of the Virgin Tympanum of the South Transept Portal, Strasbourg Cathedral in 2020. For the mood, Mary reclining in bed, surrounded by the apostles, who grieve, pray, and in late medieval art perform the rite for the dying. For the idea or message, Jesus either stands at besides or hovers above it, and holds Mary's soul in the form of a young child. This scene reflects the belief that Mary was the mother of Jesus, the incarnate Son of God, and therefore enjoyed the privilege of an especially holy death. Again, what are the art elements and principles of sculpture in Western and Classical period? The ancient era featuring the prehistoric period and Egyptian period. Next is the classical era featuring the Greek period and Roman period. And then last is the medieval era featuring the Byzantine period, Romanesque period, and the Gothic period. For your written works too, please do the Learning Task 1 on page 14, the twist and double match. So you are going to arrange the jumbled letters in column A to form the period they belong, then connect them to the statement in column B and to their pictures in column C. Please read the directions carefully. That's all for our lesson in Arts 9 Quarter 1. I hope you learned a lot for today. Again, I'm Ma'am Lanny Jane Mesana and see you again in our lesson in Arts 9 Quarter 2. Thank you and God bless.